Welcome to the Damn Strong podcast. I'm your host, Bree, and I'm a full-time online fitness coach, and my passion is to educate women on all things fitness. I help women just like you step into the power of knowledge and commitment to ultimately live your best and strongest life. In this podcast, we'll talk about being damn strong in our body, mind, and life. I'll be teaching you how to navigate nutrition, strength training, and mindset challenges. So get ready to take some notes because we're building a damn strong life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Bree, and this is the Damn Strong podcast. Welcome back. This is definitely probably one of my most highly requested. Well, that's probably not fair to say. I wouldn't say this topic has been highly requested for the pod, but I have been asked this question about like maintenance, reverse dieting so much, probably over the last, I almost want to say like 2 months. And it makes sense because I'm currently in a cut right now. And so people are really curious of like, okay, what are you going to do like after this cut? Like, what's the process after? And, I think the reason why it's such a big question is, so many people talk online, how to lose weight, how to lose weight, how to lose weight. But not a lot of people talk about like how to sustain that and how to maintain that weight after. And if I'm being really honest, I think a lot of people are scared to go back to maintenance. I think people automatically think or believe or have fears around that when they go back to maintenance, they potentially could gain weight. Like if they're not always focusing on being smaller, they risk the potential of going backwards and getting bigger or gaining body fat or whatever. And especially for my clients that lose a significant amount of weight, that fear is even greater. I would say probably the more significant weight loss you have, that fear tends to be greater. Again, that's just a general assumption. There's probably people who lose 5 pounds and are in fear of gaining that 5 pounds back, right? But that's the biggest fear, I think, around going to maintenance. And so we're going to talk about a reverse diet, how you find your maintenance, basically the diet after the diet, right? The going to maintenance after a cut, and talking through all those things. And I think a large part of it is a lot of mindset stuff and understanding, like it's a part mindset, part knowledge of what maintenance looks like. I think people have a very skewed view of what maintenance looks like and what that means. And so they automatically associate that, oh, if the scale goes up in any capacity, that means I've gained body fat. And so therefore this isn't maintenance for me. This is actually a surplus, which you may just have had ramen the night before. So you have extra sodium, so you have extra water. So let's first talk about what is a reverse diet, right? So gosh, nothing grinds my gears more than when I'm on social media and I see someone talking about a reverse diet and they are packaging it in this way to talk about how it's this like magical thing. It's going to restore your metabolism. It's actually going to allow you to eat more food. If you do reverse diet, you actually can end up eating 3,000 calories a day. And that's how I now eat 3,000 calories, is because I reverse dieted and I actually made my metabolism faster. All of these things, like they make reverse dieting sound like this magical thing that you never heard of that's going to solve all your problems. And that's just so, it's just so untrue is the only way that I can express that. Reverse dieting, all it is going from your deficit calories to your maintenance calories. That's it. That's all it means. And there's two main methods that people do to go back to maintenance. And we'll talk through those main two methods, but it's just the process of going from deficit to maintenance. That is it. It is not a magical biohack. It is not some fat loss black magic. It is not some, thing that you've been missing your whole life this is now going to solve all your problems. Yes, are these tactics a really great way for you to go from a cut to maintenance that maybe you've never done before? Sure. And it can be a very transformative journey when you're someone who has spent your whole life trying to be in a deficit, pushing fat loss, and never really tried to spend time at maintenance. It's a really great way to, in a strategic way, get yourself back to maintenance and feel in more control of that, right? So that it can't be a transformative process of learning the process of eating more food and enjoying more food and finally getting out of a deficit that maybe you've been spinning your wheels in for a really, really long time. But, reverse diet is point A to point B. So that's what it is. I made notes to talk about what it's not, which I feel like I basically already dove into that. But again, it's not this magical thing. You'll also see a lot of people online saying like, oh, this is how you repair your metabolism, all these things. Sure, we could dive into like metabolic adaptation, right? So when you do eat lower calories, your metabolism adapts some. A big reason for that is because you're a smaller body, right? So when you are eating less food as you drop in weight and you have a smaller body, your metabolism lowers because it doesn't need as much energy to maintain a smaller body. Another reason is when you're eating less calories, you tend to move a little bit less. And that's where, having a step goal and all that comes into play. And so, yes, not the reverse diet, can going back to maintenance increase your metabolism some? Absolutely. You have more food, your body's more likely going to be like, okay, we're not having to try to conserve energy. We can move around a little bit more. So people just really overshoot this thing of like reverse diets being so magical. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't have a transformative journey doing this for the first time and really coming to terms like, wow, like I can eat more food and I don't gain weight. And, I'm really happy and my workouts are going better than ever and I'm sleeping better than ever. I'm not saying that can't be part of the process, but it's not the reverse diet necessarily itself. It's you literally enjoying more food and feeling the joy and freedom and amazingness that comes with that. So if you see anyone online that's saying, hey, join my reverse diet plan, it's going to, fix your metabolism and biohack this and all these like fancy, flashy words, run. Like it's just a major red flag. When should you do a reverse diet? Who should do the reverse diet? Again, it's a process of going from deficit to maintenance. So if you're currently in a deficit or have been trying to be in a deficit or whatever, if your process is trying to be in a deficit, lose body fat, and you want to go to maintenance, that's who should be doing a reverse diet. It's just if you want to go to maintenance calories, that's who should do it. So anyone who has that specific goal. And now let's talk through how you would do that, right? What's the process? So there's two processes that I like to talk about. I call the first one the crawl and the second one the jump and crawl. I just named it that because I think it'll stick for y'all. It's not like some trademark thing or copyright thing or some fancy word on how to describe it. I just think it'll stick for everyone if you call the first method the crawl and the second method the jump and crawl, because it'll help you remember the methods that I talk through. So the most common method that you will see people do for reverse diet is the crawling method or the slow methodical method. So when they are officially done being in a deficit, what they will do is they will add 50 to 100 calories to their deficit calories every 1 to 2 weeks. So let's say their deficit calories are 1,600. Their first week out of a deficit, there's going to increase to either 1,650 or 1,700. So they're still in a deficit, right? So let's say they put themselves in a 500 calorie deficit at 1,600 calories. They increased. They went from 1,600 calories to 1,700 calories. They just put themselves basically at that point less in a deficit. So they're moving towards maintenance, right? I think that's really, really important to note that as you're reversing, you're slowly just taking yourself less and less and less out of a deficit in this process, right? So the slow methodical, every few weeks, jumping your calories, 50 to 100, every 1 or 2 weeks. And the pros of doing it that way is it's a really good process if you're really, really terrified of seeing the scale jump. And this is something we really need to talk about, is in both of these methods that I'm going to talk through, the scale is going to go up. And I think that's what gets people a lot is they think, okay, I ended my deficit at 140, like my weight ended at 140. I want to maintain this. And then they eat extra food and they don't realize that the food in your stomach weighs something. So you're going to go up on the scale just from simply having more food in your body. And so the slow methodical method is a nice way for people who are really terrified of seeing that scale jump really high. Like again, the scale's going to go up, so it's going to challenge you. But for people who are really, really nervous of seeing that scale jump up really, really fast. And so they might be, okay, I'm going to go from 1,600 to 1,700 calories. Okay, I saw the scale only go up 0.2 this week. Okay, I need to recognize I ate more food. I'm not out of a deficit. I'm still in a deficit. I only increased my calories by 100. And so it's a really, really good mindset challenge for people who are really scared of the scale and just need that slower approach. The cons, though, of doing it this way is 1, you're still in a deficit. 2, you probably won't get to feeling better sooner, right? So if you are really struggling with sleep, really struggling with your strength in the gym, really struggling with fatigue, you're probably still going to feel some of those things because you've only given yourself an extra 100 calories. Now, it's not to say that an extra 100 calories won't make you feel better in some capacity. You may feel a little bit better. It may be that, hey, you feel a little bit less fatigue. But if you're feeling like pretty shitty at the end of your deficit, you're going to have to ride that out a little bit longer because it's going to take longer for you to get to your maintenance. So if you're only increasing, 100 calories let's like play worst case scenario. Let's say you're increasing 100 calories every 2 weeks. And you're trying to get to 500. That's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8. That's 10 more weeks of you still being in a deficit. Remember, you're working your way up to your maintenance. You don't actually start being at maintenance till you get to maintenance. If you were just in a deficit for 8 weeks, you have just continued a smaller deficit, but still in a deficit for an additional 10 weeks. And so that can be tough. Again, there are trade-offs to both of these. I do have clients currently that we are reverse dieting and we are doing the slow approach. It's kind of been a hybrid for some people. Some, they have expressed they're really nervous about the scale and they want to take the slow approach, but they have seen how much better they feel with more food. And we've kind of gotten to do things a little bit quicker because they're like, oh my gosh, like I understand the scale is going to increase. I look exactly the same. I feel so much better. Is there any way I could get more calories this week? Like, can we just go ahead and give me more calories? I'm like, absolutely. So, I say there's 2 methods, but really there's a bunch of different methods. Technically, this client that I'm thinking of in my head, we did like a slow approach for like 2-3 weeks. And she's like, wow, I feel so much better with more food. Can I get more? And now we've jumped her a little bit more. So it's been kind of like a slow, fast, slow kind of method for her. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but these are the main 2 ways that I'm talking through. So again, the con is 1, you're in a deficit for longer. 2, you don't get to feel as good as quickly. And 3, like you just don't get more calories right away. Like at the end of your deficit, most people are kind of itching for more food and you still have to push through and have less food. So again, there's pros and cons to both. I'm not going to say this is a bad method because I do use it. It's just few scenarios that I end up using this in. Okay, let's talk about the second method. So the second method I call the jump and crawl. So there's still a crawling method to this, but you jump first and then you start crawling. And this is my favorite way, just because this is going to be one of my pros for this one. You get to feeling better so much quicker. You get food quicker. It's just, it's my favorite method. And I had always done the slow approach before until I did this method, and it is the best. So let me walk through, or in my opinion, it's the best. Again, the best is going to be what you can adhere to, what you can actually do. But it's my favorite method of how I work with my clients and how I do it myself. And this is what I will be doing. So the jump and crawl method is where you guess where your maintenance calories are, right? You're going to take a guess. Either you have previous knowledge of where your maintenance is. Like I know when I was around like a 140 weight, I was maintaining at like 23 to 2,400 calories. That's good insight for me to have. Now I weigh less than 140 now. I'm averaging about 134. So will my metabolism be a little bit lower? Yes, because I weigh less. So it's a good ballpark though for me to know when I was maintaining at 140, I was at 23 to 2,400 calories. So you can have prior knowledge. Another way you can figure out and guess your maintenance is you can just go online, go to an online calculator, put in your information, take the number that it gives you and say, okay, this is probably where my maintenance calories is. It's not perfect. It's always going to be a guess. That's the thing that we need to recognize is no matter what, whether you have a coach, whether you use an online calculator, whatever, it's always going to be guess. I even have to guess. Again, I have a really good idea of where my maintenance calories are probably going to be, but I still weigh currently right now 6 pounds less than 140, right? So I am taking my best educated guess on the knowledge that I have. So for you, you're going to take your best guess either from prior knowledge or you're going to go online, use an online calculator. If you need a recommendation, tdeecalculator.net. That's TDEE calculator.net. PN1 also has a calculator. You're going to put in your information. You're going to hit calculate. You should see I think it says maintenance on there. You're going to click maintenance and it'll say, hey, these are the calories that you would probably maintain at. And you're only going to go about 80% of the way there. And the reason why is because, again, this is a guess, right? So you take your guess. Let's say the calculator says like, hey, your maintenance is probably 2,100 calories. Okay, let's go back to the example of your deficit 1,600 calories. Or you're at 1,600 calories. Let's just say that's what you're at currently in your deficit. And you did the online calculator and it says, hey, your maintenance calories are probably 2,100. You're like, cool, awesome. You know what? I'm only going to jump like 80% of the way there. So I'm going to go from 1,600 calories to like 1,900, somewhere in that range of like 18 to 1,900. And you can even do that. Give yourself a range of like 18 to 1,900 is where you're going to put yourself. And you're just going to go ahead and jump there. You're not going to slowly, methodically add 100 calories this week and then 50 calories the next week and then 50 calories the next week. You're just going to go ahead and jump most of the way to your maintenance, right? And then from there, that's where you're going to crawl. Because again, we don't know your maintenance. Your maintenance could be 2,000, not 2,100. And so the crawling after you jump, the crawling method works really well. So you can test to see where that maintenance is. So you jump yourself most of the way there. Let's just say, again, you give yourself a range of 18 to 1900. And from there, you jump yourself. You're going to want to give yourself a few weeks to see your weight jump out. Because here's the thing, when you are adding 300 calories to where you've previously been, that's going to be some food inside your stomach. Again, we have to recognize that then you're going to be eating 1,600 calories one day. The next day, you're going to eat 1,900. And simply from having more food in your body, the scale is going to immediately go up. You need to give it 2 to 3 weeks there. Just let yourself sit. Honestly, maybe even 2, just because it's that initial jump, right? Give yourself some time to sit there, watch the scale fluctuate out. It actually may even drop because technically you're probably still in a deficit. You maybe see little drops, right? And so you need yourself to give yourself some time to see it go up. And then if you're watching me on video, you'll see my hand goes up in an angle because that initial jump for more food in your body, and then it will kind of even out. And then from there, every 1 to 2 weeks, again, you have to count for your period, things like that, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, you will adjust your calories and walk and crawl your way up from there. So it's like if you jump to 1900, you sit there for 2 weeks, your weight kind of evens out. The next week you jump up to 2000, you wait 2 weeks, maybe even 3 because your period fell in one of those weeks. And you see, okay, wow, I actually net, right? You look at all of your weigh-ins for 3 weeks, you average all of those. You're like, wow, net, I actually dropped 0.1 pounds. So I'm going to increase to 100 again. You go from 2000 to 2100. And this is the part that everyone gets mixed up. And this applies to the crawl method and the jump and crawl. What maintenance actually looks like. A lot of people think that, okay, cool. So I warned you guys about you end your deficit weighing 140 pounds. You're going to increase, let's say you eat more food. Now you are averaging at 143. It's not that you just jump up to 143 because you have more food in your stomach and then you just stay 143 for the rest of your life. You're going to weigh 143 and then you're going to drop a pound and you're going to go up a pound and you're going to drop half a pound. And you're going to go up half a pound. And so you have to look at the trend line. It works the exact same for when you're in a deficit or when you're in surplus. When you're in a deficit, right, you have these peaks and valleys, but when you look over time, there's a trend line that goes down. The same things happens at maintenance. You will have peaks and valleys constantly every single day. But when you look back at the last, 2-3 weeks, you can draw a trend line across and say, oh, wow, the trend line goes straight across. And maybe you net 0.01 or 0.2 or 0.0. And so maintenance isn't this thing where the scale increases because you have more food. And then you just forever, every single day for the rest of your life, weigh in at 143. It's going to fluctuate around because, you're going to have, I always use ramen example, ramen one night and then pizza one night. And then you're going to have a really intense training session. And that's going to cause inflammation. It's going to go up and down, the exact same thing as a deficit. And people have such a hard time getting past this. So that's how you know you're at maintenance, is when you look back at the past, I would say 3 weeks. I would always err on the side of more weeks than less when it comes to maintenance. It takes a little bit longer to see those trends when it comes to maintenance. So let's say after 3 weeks, you look at your trends and let's say you have a nice little chart line and goes up and down and you see the trend line going straight across. Or you could look at your past averages for the last 3 weeks and say, okay, if I average all of my losses or gains for the past 3 weeks, I actually netted, negative 0.1. Okay, cool. I probably am getting pretty close, but I might need to increase my calories a little bit more. Or I say over the past 3 weeks, you've netted a positive 0.02. You're like, okay, I'm probably pretty damn close to my maintenance. And that's how you know where your maintenance is. You look back at your data for a chunk of weeks and you take the net amount of the averages of loss and gains, and that's how you know your maintenance. It's not always going to be 0.0, right? It might be 0.01 or maybe 0.1. And then, over the next couple of weeks, then it's negative 0.1. And you just have over time even out. Again, it's looking at that trend line. Something else that I would love. So that's the jump and crawl method, is that you jump yourself 80% of the way. And again, I know I keep saying 80% of the way, and I'm sure a ton of you guys are like, well, what's 80%? Don't overthink it. Just jump yourself where you feel comfortable, and then you can work your way up from there. I tend to be on the more aggressive side of things. Again, with I'll kind of tell you guys my plan. So I know I was maintaining at 23 to 2,400 when I was at 140. I'm just going to assume, I don't know if this is the case because I also have more muscle now than I did then, but I'm also have less body fat than I did then. So that affects it. So my maintenance could still be 23 to 2,400 calories. I'm just going to assume it's at that 22 to 23. So I'm going to immediately jump myself to 2,000 calories. Like absolutely day one, we're going to 2,000 calories. And then I'm probably going to ride that out for 3-ish weeks because I would assume probably my period's going to fall in there 1 week. And I just like to have longer data to see. The more data you have, the more accurate it's going to be. And then from there, I'm like, okay, I'm going to jump myself up to 2,100. And then I'm going to jump myself up to, to 2,000 or 2,200. And then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment with my upper end of maintenance. I think a lot of people are very scared to potentially tap into a surplus, but I really want to see like, what's the top end? Like, what is the most calories I can really, really like? I want to push it. Like, I want to know, okay, when do I slightly get into a surplus? So I know, okay, that's where the scale finally tips. And so I think what a lot of women are scared of is potentially going into a surplus. But you have to remember at the end of the day, if you're increasing your calories by like 50 to 100 every week, if you accidentally put yourself in a surplus by like 100 calories, you may put on like 0.2 pounds of body fat, 0.2, not 2 pounds, 0.2 pounds of body fat in a month. And if that really, really bothered you, you could be like, oh, I don't like this. You go into deficit for 1 week, you cut that 0.2 pounds of body fat, and then you go right back to maintenance if it really bothered you. But I think that that's a whole nother discussion of like, why is you weighing 0.2 pounds heavier like really bothering you, or potentially that you put that on? So, but we're not going to dive into that. I want to test the upper end. So I want to go up to 2,200. And if it looks like I'm kind of maintaining there, like from the data I have, it's like, okay, wow, like from here, it looks like I'm at a positive 0.01. I'm probably at maintenance, like with that small of a number of an increase. But I want to see if I can push it to 2,300. And so I'm going to wait till I actually see myself consistently be in a surplus for probably about 2-3 weeks. And once I know I'm in a surplus, I'll be like, okay, this is where the tipping point is. Maybe I get up to 2,500 calories. 2,500 calories where I officially slightly enter a surplus. So I'm going to back down to 2,400 and know that 2,400 is kind of right around that 24 to 2,500 is my tipping range. I think a lot of women are terrified to experience that. I think women just automatically assume that the second you cross over into surplus territory, you automatically start rapidly gaining weight. And it's like, no, that's not the case. It depends how much into a surplus that you are. It's just like the second you start saving money doesn't mean you start saving $2,000 a day, right? Like there's a range of how much money that you save and you spend, right? Like there's this number in the middle of if you spend exactly what you make, you're at maintenance. You're maintaining your bank account balance. If you spend $1 less than you make, you're saving $1 per day, right? Or whatever it is. And so it's like, it's not just the second that you cross over into saving money, you automatically save $2,000, or the second you cross into overspending money by $1, you're losing all this money. Deficit and surplus are the exact same thing. There's this like line of like where your maintenance kind of is, or this area of where your maintenance is. And then there's, the scale or, tips or slides based on how much you are into the surplus or the deficit. I hope this makes sense. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, and I wish I had like a whiteboard that I could draw this out on. So I'm trying to explain, but I hope that makes sense. So all of that to say, I know this is a big step for a lot of people. I know officially saying, okay, I'm no longer going to be in this deficit mindset is a massive step for some of y'all. So if you don't feel comfortable pushing your upper end of maintenance, that's okay. I'm just happy that you are going to maintenance. I've had a handful of clients recently that have been in maintenance. They can't remember the maintenance. They've been in a deficit for a long time. They actually can't remember the last time they just tried to eat enough food just to maintain their body weight. They've constantly been on this hamster wheel of trying to lose body fat. And they're like, you know what? It's time to go to maintenance. Like they just had this real aha moment. And I'm so, so proud of them. And they want to take the slow approach. And I'm totally fine with that. Yes, the jump and crawl method is my favorite one. But the fact that I get to help a client realize that their best life is most likely, is going to be at maintenance already has me so happy. I'm down for whatever method you want to take as far as getting back to maintenance. And so I understand that's a big ask of a lot of people. And so don't feel like, just because I'm saying like, okay, if you reverse and you go up to maintenance, you need to push yourself past maintenance and see where your upper end is. And you need to be okay with going into a little bit of surplus. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is some of you have played around with maintenance for a long time. You've never really experimented with like, okay, like where could I actually be at? And, where would really pushing the limits be? And worst case scenario, like you gain maybe like I think I said this earlier, like maybe half a pound of body fat over the course of a month. And if it really bothered you that bad, you could go into a 250 calorie deficit for a week and lose that half pound of body fat. You know what I mean? Like it took you a whole 4 weeks to even put on half a pound of body fat, but then you could, if it really bothered you, again, I think that's a whole nother mindset thing. Like, why is that bothering you? Because you're not going to look different with half a pound of body fat on you. If you really wanted to, you could nip that in the bud in a week. So there's really not a risk of playing around with that, of where your upper end of maintenance is. Okay. I feel like I like really talked y'all's head off. I feel very, very passionate about this if y'all can't tell. This is where I'm going to kind of wrap things up. So that's kind of the method of how you do it is you pick one of them, you either crawl your way up or you jump and crawl, and then you have data and you watch that data over time. And that's how you end up figuring out where your maintenance is. That's how you reverse diet. And so I want to leave you guys with a real mindset thing to think about. We should be living most of our lives in maintenance. And I'm sure there's a lot of you listening to this podcast that you can't remember the last time you weren't pursuing fat loss. Like you look back on 5 years ago, college, high school, whatever it is, and you're like, I can't remember a time where I wasn't pursuing, always trying to be smaller. And so this is your big wake up call and sign to be like, maybe it's time for you to take a break and see what life at maintenance can give you. Life at maintenance that's where we should be living most of the time, right? Like, yes, I understand people can struggle to be in a deficit. And so you may have, gone through deficits, a lot of different deficits because, maybe you didn't commit, or maybe you, didn't have the right mindset, or you struggled because of X, Y, Z. And so you've been through a lot of deficits. But if we zoom out and, bless you that you live 80 years, right? Deficits in your life should be so small, like in the grand scheme of things, right? Like let's even look at my journey, right? This is just fitness in general. I've been pursuing this style of fitness life for the last 10 years. The first 5 years were a lot of mindset shit, a lot of things I had to work through. I was constantly yo-yoing, figuring things out, following the wrong people, following the wrong stuff, going through fat. I was pursuing strength training and being in a calorie deficit, but it took a lot of trial and error for me to finally get to a point after 5 freaking years to be like, Brie, we've got to follow through on this stuff. And then over the course of 5 years, if I spent 5 years in a deficit to lose body fat, if I lived for 80 years, right? Those 5 years are 0.066% of my life. That is so small. You know what I mean? Like you will be living in maintenance most of your life, right? Like and even think about for you guys who are struggling to be consistent, right? If you're someone who's on that hamster wheel and you're never losing weight, you're struggling to be consistent and be in a deficit and you've just been maintaining for the last 2 years, you're in maintenance right now. You know what I mean? Like if you're not dropping and losing pounds on the scale and you're in spinning, you're at maintenance right now. So deficits are such a small portion of our life. And I understand that we live in a society nowadays where, being overweight is a big issue that a lot of people deal with. And so I think we put so many eggs in the deficit basket. And I think there's a time and a space for that. I talk about fat loss a ton, right? A lot, because a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle getting down to healthy weight, but I think we need to put just as much importance on that into maintenance because that's where you're going to be spending most of your life. So when you're in a deficit, let's do habits that you will be doing at maintenance because yeah, it's awesome if you lose body fat and body weight, but we want to maintain that after, right? Like that's the whole goal is that you lose the body fat and then you can live your life maintaining that. And then I want to add this in here too. There's a whole other discussion of like the weight that you end your deficit at may not be your best life, right? And that's something that I'm going to have to navigate is, I 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I went through a deficit. I got down to 133 pounds. I reversed, went up to maintenance. I sat about 137. So for me, after I'm in a deficit and I go back to eating more food, my maintenance food, I'm roughly about 5 pounds of fluctuation. I say a normal rate of normal poundage fluctuation range is like 2 to 5 pounds. I have some clients that they just fluctuate 2 pounds all the time, and that's about it. I have clients like me that are much on the upper end. When they start eating food, their, body weight pound just goes up about 5 pounds, and that's kind of where they maintain. And that's me. So I went from about 133 to averaging 137 and tracking my food. And then I took a break and I didn't track my food. And I crept up to 140, and then I maintained 140 for like 4 months, because my lifestyle and probably my happiest life is actually 3 pounds heavier, right? It could be, there's multiple ways we can split this up. It could be that my lifestyle, I actually eat more calories that's conducive to my body weighing 140 pounds, right? It also could be that, my body doesn't like being that lean. And so it puts some more hunger cues on me. It increased my hunger cues to have me eat a little bit more and get up to 140. I was like, oh, okay, this is a good body fat level. We like this. And then my hunger cues weren't as strong. And so I just kind of maintained, right? I don't know which one it was. My guess is I think it was a little bit of both. I think my body was happier sitting on 140, but I also enjoy being social. And with more social events, I'm going to have higher calorie things. And so that maybe was what had me gain 3 pounds of body fat. But what matters is having your happiest life. And so that's something I'm going to have to deal with at this deficit. I'm currently at 134, but I'm a leaner 134 than the last time I was 134. I'm way leaner. And so I'm going to have to understand that once I come out of tracking, I may gain body fat because, one, my lifestyle, the way that I eat, is actually a little bit more than my 134 pound maintenance. And so I'll gain a little bit of weight, because remember, as we talked about earlier, a larger body requires more calories. So I may gain weight. I may go from 134 to maybe it's 138. Let's say it's where my body's happy at. So I maybe eat a little bit in a surplus from 134 to 138. I now weigh 138, and the calories that I'm eating at is now my maintenance, because I've increased my body size to a point where the calories that were previously a little bit of a surplus are now my maintenance. And so my happier life may be at 138. And that's something else you have to battle too is, gosh, I feel like a broken record saying, like, re-saying all this on this podcast, but like, you need to get it through your head that your leanest life is not going to be your happiest life. It could be. It's very possible that you're one of those people that is super active. You lose a bunch of weight, you get really, really lean. And because you're super active, you're able to maintain it really, really, really well, right? And you don't really change much. But it's also, we need to recognize that like you lost a lot of the weight because you were tracking, you were in a calorie deficit, and then you went to maintenance and you were tracking at maintenance. And so therefore it's easy to maintain. And then when you stop tracking, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but I think for the most goal for most people is to stop tracking, right? And when you stop tracking, you just allow your hunger cues to kind of guide you. Maybe sometimes you don't allow your hunger cues to guide you. You do push past a little bit of fullness. Maybe you gain 1 or 2 pounds of body fat and then you maintain from there, but that's your happier life, right? It makes me so sad that we're so focused on, it's hard to balance because it's like we're so focused on numbers, right, as a society, but then I use data and numbers to help guide me where I'm going and my clients with where we're going. And so it's this fine balance of like, okay, I recognize this is where I'm coming to, but I also need to recognize this might not be my best life. So I want you to keep in mind that when you reverse diet after you come out of a deficit, the scale is going to increase because you simply have more food, more glycogen stores, more water in your body. There's physically more things in your body, right? And then as you track at maintenance, you'll maintain the body weight, right? Like you'll maintain that. I hope you guys are hearing what I'm saying of the example that I'm trying to get through. But I think a lot of times we stop tracking. Our body weight increases a little bit. We see that as the end of the world instead of seeing like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is just my lifestyle and I'm actually happier a few pounds heavier. It could totally be that you're losing control now that you don't have tracking anymore and that you start to go backwards. But allow yourself to at least experiment with maybe weighing a little bit heavier because that could be your better life. So I'm going to stop beating that one down. I feel like y'all hear what I'm saying. Thank you once again for joining me on another podcast episode. As always, screenshot and share this episode to your stories if you really loved it. It is a free way to support the podcast. Also, I don't ever mention this. Well, I kind of do in my outro, but if you don't mind leaving like a 5-star review, that would be awesome. I didn't realize on Spotify that you just tap the 5 stars at the top. I thought you had to like go like leave a whole review and like everything. And then I don't know. I just didn't really understand how the review process works. So if you don't mind, whether you're on Spotify or Apple, just giving like a little 5-star if you really, really love it. If you hate it, I guess you can give me a 1 star. I'd much rather you reach out and tell me why you don't like the podcast and how I can improve. But if you enjoyed it, if you don't mind, just on your phone, just tap at the top and just give the podcast a 5-star review. That would be amazing. But again, screenshotting, sharing your stories really gets the podcast out there. It's a free way to support. And I always super appreciate it. And it always just makes my entire day and week seeing you guys share the podcast. As always, have a wonderful week, and I will catch you guys in the next podcast. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Damn Strong Podcast. Show me some love by leaving a review and sharing a screenshot of this episode on your Instagram stories. Until next time, stay strong.